What's up, guys? Welcome to 3BS, Three Bro Sports. Today we're doing a pre-draft power rankings. This is obviously before the draft, so a lot of these things can change depending on how teams draft. But we're gonna go from 32 to 1, and Devin's gonna start us off.
My 32nd team in the NFL, worst team is the Lions. They do have a decent quarterback, Matthew Stafford, that has showed promise in the NFL. But besides that, they don't really have a good roster around him. Defense is a really big liability. They lost Darius Slay to free agency. I didn't really like the free agency moves that they made. They didn't really make any big moves whatsoever. So to me, this just shows that they're sort of in a rebuilding stage. You're going to build through the draft. So they're not really trying to be a championship contender this year. But what they've done in free agency, they didn't really add anything to make them a good team. So they have a lot of holes on defense. But if I would have to say, their best position is probably wide receiver. They have Kerryon Johnson at running back. So their offense isn't too bad. But in my opinion, just from like what they didn't do in free agency, I feel like they're the worst team in the NFL.
For me, at 32, I have the Jets. I don't think they're anywhere near winning a championship. They've had terrible seasons for as long as I can remember. Nothing really promising. I think they're not in a situation, where we're one player away from, making a huge difference. There's a lot of aspects on that team that need to be taken care of before we can boost them up on this power ranking.
In my 32 in power rankings, I have the Lions. I just think that they have way too many holes, and I don't think that they filled many of them, if any at all, in free agency. They did bring in Desmond Trufant after they lost cornerback Darius Slay. So we'll see what they do in the draft, but as of now, they just have too many holes for me. So I think they're the worst team in the NFL.
I agree. The 31st worst team in the NFL, I have the Jets. TJ gave some pretty good reasons why that the Jets are a pretty bad team right now. I feel like they're in a rebuilding stage too. They went out and they made some big signings last year in free agency, and they didn't really pan out for them. A lot of people thought Le'Veon Bell would be a really good signing, but he ended up not being a really good signing for the Jets based off of last season. They also have a lot of holes all around the whole team. Receiving core is just horrendous. They signed a couple linemen in free agency. But besides that, there wasn't any big signings in free agency to show me that they wanted to be a contender this year. When you think of the Jets, they don't really have too many stars on their team. They have Jamal Adams and Le'Veon and maybe Sam Darnold. But Sam Darnold hasn't really shown much yet. But I think he could. Time will tell. But as of right now, I think the Jets need to have a lot of work to be a good team.
Yeah, 31, I have the Redskins. I think they're kind of the same way as the Jets. They're definitely in a rebuilding stage, have a lot of holes to fill, especially offensive-wise. Until they can surround Haskins, and if they're for sure that they want to stick with Dwayne Haskins, until they can surround him with some weapons on offense and, some younger talent, I think they have themselves in a hole. They've always been mediocre, even with some amazing players. Just being an Eagles fan, you guys being Cowboys fans, I'm sure you can agree on that. They're never a team where you see them coming up on your schedule and you're like, oh, this is going to be a tough game. It's always, as an Eagles fan, I always overlook that game and always like, this should be a pretty easy win.
Yeah, my 31 team in the NFL, I have the Jets. I just feel like the Lions, they have very many holes. Their defense, they have C.J. Mosley and Jamal Adams. Those are some of their bigger name players. But if Adams is holding out, that just really hurts their defense. And that could actually make them the worst team in the league for me. They have no weapons for Sam Darnold besides Le'Veon Bell, and he was very low bar last year for his standard. So I could see them definitely as the worst team in the NFL next year.
I agree, too. The 30th team that I have is the Redskins. Like TJ said, there's a ton of needs that they have, especially offensively, like he said. Dwayne Haskins hasn't proved anything yet. He started a few games towards the end of the season. He did okay. Didn't show a lot of promising. They don't really have a lot of great weapons. They have Terry McLaurin. Other than that, they don't really have a running back, many other weapons at receiver to really surround him with. People to make me think that they're going to develop him into a good quarterback. Their strong point of their team is the D line, and I feel like if they do add Chase Young, which I'm not saying this is pre-draft, but I'm saying if they would, it would make their team tremendously better on defense because he's a game changer. But as it stands right now, their defense isn't very good either, so that's why I have them so low. They also didn't make many free agency moves.
30, I have the Jaguars. I mean, they're a team that I feel like they could have potential, but I mean, a few years ago, they had such an amazing defense, and I feel like as every year goes on, one or two pieces of that like stellar defense keep falling away. And even having Yannick Ngakoue in trade talks, and now even offensive wise, you're putting all your hope into Gardner Minshew, who you're not even, I mean, did decently well, but I mean, who knows with that? And now I just saw a thing out today that Leonard Fournette is in trade talks with other teams. So depending on what happens with that, I feel like they should be sitting there at 30.
Yeah, at 30, I have the Redskins. I just don't think that Dwayne Haskins is the answer for them. Even though that he was their first-round pick last year. They have a lot of problems on defense, but one thing they do have going for them is their defensive line, which there's a good chance they will be adding Chase Young in the draft too. So we'll see how that pans out for them. But their offense, they have Terry McLaurin. We'll see if he pans out, but I just don't think that they'll be a very good team next year. That's why I have them at 30.
I agree. The 29th team, I have the Jags. The Jags are they're showing it pretty much that they're just in rebuild mode. They traded their vet quarterback that they just signed to a big deal, Nick Foles. Like TJ said, they have Leonard Fournette just came out today. He's on the trade block. They traded a good defensive end, probably Pro Bowl caliber. He could get to Pro Bowl caliber again. Calais Campbell away for a 5th-round pick. They're pretty much just trying to get a haul in the draft, trying to trade for picks to make their team better in the future. And they're just showing me, as of right now, that they're not looking to win right now. Like TJ said, they have Gardner Minshew. He showed some promising moments last year, but also there's a lot of uncertainty there. They have DJ Chark. He's a good receiver. But other than that, there's not much there. They traded Jalen Ramsey away. There's a lot of holes. That's why I have them there.
29, I have the Lions. You guys pretty much sum that up pretty well. A lot of holes to fill. Do have some promising spots on offense, but I think defensive wise is where they're really going to struggle this year. I mean, Desmond Trufant, he's not going to come in and completely hype up your defense and make them, a top 10 defense in the league. So a lot of work to be done there, but I do think their offense, depending on how they go draft day, I think they can show a lot of promising signs as well.
29, I have the Giants. They have they have a few young pieces on offense in Slayton, Evan Ingram, and Daniel Jones. But I think that their line's a very big concern for them. They're going to have to be able to protect Daniel Jones. Their defense could be, I don't know, it's not going to be anything great. It's not going to lead them to win more games, but if Daniel Jones can progress this year, I think that'll be a step in the right direction for them. But right now, I have them slotted in at 29.
Yeah. My 28th team, I have the Giants. Like Kade said, Daniel Jones was a rookie quarterback last year, and they have one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. It's not smart to build your team around a bad offensive line. That's just a terrible mistake. Right now, like Kate said, they do have some pieces: Evan Ingram, Saquon Barkley, Darius Slayton, Golden Tate. Their offense isn't too bad on paper, but without a good line, you're not going to win games. That's just true. Defensively, they have a couple decent players, but there's not really any studs on defense that just jump off your screen and say, like, I'm a really good player that just, solidifies a defense. So that's why I have them lower. I think if they could draft good, they could maybe jump up into the low 20s, maybe into the teens, possibly into this, but that's about it for the Giants this year, I think.
28, I have the Steelers. 2 years ago, you asked me about the Steelers, and they're definitely in my top 10. But at this point, I mean, they've lost so many good players, and I just don't think Ben Roethlisberger, his age is definitely going to start. I think if he stays healthy this year, I think we're going to see a big time thing with that. His age is really going to start to set in. I mean, they have some young players that are starting to come up. I mean, James Conner is showing some promising things and stuff like that. But you have Micah Fitzpatrick on defense, but I still think they have a lot of holes to fill and stuff like that.
At 28, I have the Jags. Like you guys said, Gardner Minshew, is he the answer? We don't know that. They have DJ Chark, but other than that, on offense, they don't have too many weapons for him. You got Leonard Fournette, but report came out today that he's on a trading block, so we'll see what happens there. They lost a lot of pieces on defense, and I just think that overall as a team, they're getting worse. So I have them at 28.
Yep. At 27, I have the Dolphins. I feel like the Dolphins, they have a step in the right direction. I feel like they have one of the best free agencies in the league this year. They added a few key players, Kyle Van Noy, Kamar Grugier-Hill. They added Byron Jones, the corner, really good corner. They added a couple other big players, but right now they're a young team. They don't really have enough for me to put them higher. If they draft well, then maybe we'll be talking about this later on, but you can't bank on the draft. We said the same thing about the Browns last year. On paper, they look really good, but they're just not proven at all yet, and I can't believe it till I see it. So, and not only that, you don't know if they're going to have a good quarterback. You don't know if any of the quarterbacks that they'll draft, if any of them will pan out with any of the teams. So that's why I have them so low.
27, I have the Giants. I still think they have a lot of work to do on both sides of the football, especially offensive line. I think that's one of the big things that's really hurting their offense. I mean, you have Saquon Barkley, top 3 running back in the NFL, in my opinion, and Evan Ingram, who can be really promising. I mean, he's off and on with injuries sometimes, but I think if they fill some of those holes in that offensive line and add some better plays to that defense, I think they could be a pretty good team. But as of right now, still a lot of work to do, and they're not ready to win a championship.
At 27, I have the Cincinnati Bengals. They are bringing back this year A.J. Green, Jonah Williams from injury, and Joe Mixon had some promising moments at the end of the season last year. And most likely they will be bringing in Joe Burrow. I mean, it's almost guaranteed at this point. But their offensive line is a very big concern for me. If they're not going to be able to protect Burrow, that could lead to some serious problems for them. They didn't make too many moves in free agency. So we'll see if Burrow can lead them. But as for next year, I have them at 27.
My 26th team, I have the Panthers. So a lot of people have the Panthers a little bit higher. For me, I just feel like I'm not too sold on Teddy Bridgewater. He did amazing with a great team last year. When he played, he won all of his games except for one. I think he went 5-1, which is amazing. But he also is playing for one of the best coaches and one of the best teams in the NFL. He's going from an amazing offense to a not-so-good offense with not many weapons whatsoever besides DJ Moore. They got rid of their tight end, Greg Olsen. It's definitely a downgrade for me from Cam Newton when Cam Newton was healthy. So, and not only that, they have a lot of holes on defense. Luke Kuechly retired. There's certain other players that are gone. So I just feel like the Panthers, they're sort of in more of a rebuild than trying to win a championship right now. So that's why I have them lower.
26, I have the Bengals. Kade pretty well summed it up. I mean, A.J. Green's coming back. He's a decent receiver, but age is going to start hitting him too. I mean, over the past years, the Bengals haven't been anything too special. And I don't think assuming they do bring in Joe Burrow, I don't think he's going to be it's not going to be an instant, now that we have Burrow, we're going to have a winning season. They need to, kind of, once they have him, start to build around him, which might take a year or two.
26, I have the Miami Dolphins. They did bring in a few defensive pieces. They have Byron Jones now, and they have 3 first-round draft picks. So if they do draft right, they could definitely shoot up my power rankings. But as of now, with no QB, well, they have Fitzpatrick, but he's not going to cut it. But yeah, if they do draft right, maybe bring in Tua, bring in a few more pieces to protect him on the offensive line, I could definitely see them shooting up. But for now, I have them at 26.
For me, I have the Chargers at 25. A lot of people have the Chargers higher. I'm not as high on the Chargers as a lot of people. Last year, they have almost the same roster as they do this year. They added Chris Harris Jr. That's about the only signing they really made. Right now, their quarterback situation isn't good at all. They have Tyrod Taylor as their starting quarterback. And you can say their roster looks good on paper all you want. Look at how good they did last year. I mean, right now, they're a worse team than they were last year with the loss of Phillip Rivers. So that's why I don't have them as high as a lot of people do, because for the last couple of years, they really haven't performed. They've really underperformed. And banking on a rookie quarterback to come in and be able to take a team to the playoffs, I'm not going to bank on that. That's why I have them lower than some teams.
At 25, I also have the Chargers. I agree with you there, Devin. Their quarterback situation is definitely going to be a huge thing here. Whether you decide to go, maybe pick up Cam in free agency or go the draft route, either way, you can't say that either or is going to come into that system and do amazing. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good weapons on that offense and defense. I think just a lot of the time they just fail to use them. But if they don't solve that quarterback situation, it's not going to work out very well for them.
At 25, I have the Carolina Panthers. They had some very big names walk or retire this offseason. We all know Cam Newton's gone, Greg Olsen, Luke Kuechly. As of now, their defense looks horrendous to me. But their offense, I can see a little bit of hope if Teddy Bridgewater plays like he did last year. DJ Moore, he has a lot of upside. I like him. So we'll see what they can do in the draft. Maybe they're definitely going to want to go defense in the draft. But I definitely think they got worse from last season, so I have them at 25.
At 24, I have the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos are a team on this list that I could see climbing really high up. They're one of my sleeper teams for this year. I could see them climbing up to possibly in the teens if they draft correctly. And their quarterback situation, I mean, Drew Lock is good. If he turns out to be a good quarterback, I could see them climbing up. But as of now, Drew Lock is unproven. He looked decently last year. He looked all right. But right now, I mean, on offense, they lost Melvin Gordon, A.J. Boye. Or no, they gained, sorry, my bad. They gained Melvin Gordon, A.J. Boye, and Jarrell Casey. So, I mean, that's good for them, but I just feel like their defense is kind of a little bit shaky right now. So, I mean, I think the Broncos are a good team. That's why I think they can climb up. But right now, with the quarterback being young and inexperienced, we don't know how he's going to be. That's why I have them lower and at that pick.
I also have the Broncos at 24. I think they have a lot of promising aspects. I mean, not sure what they're going to do here in the draft with receiver-wise, but, I mean, they brought in Melvin Gordon. Philip Lindsay is a really good running back. Quarterback situation, we have to see how that pans out, obviously. He didn't play very, very much, but I think that they could be a decent team depending on how they draft. And, I mean, can't say anything too early because you never know how teams are going to pan out, but as of right now, I have them sitting at 24. Still have some things that they need to fill.
At 24, I have the Chargers. They lost their longtime quarterback, Phillip Rivers. But I think that they have a lot of upside this year. They're going to be getting full seasons out of Derwin James, Hunter Henry. Well, as of now, both of them are healthy. But if they can both stay healthy for the whole season, and with the addition of Chris Harris Jr., and they could be really good this year. But as of now, their quarterback as Tyrod Taylor, I don't think that they can count on Justin Herbert, if that's who they draft, to come in and lead them in the playoffs. So that's why I have them low, but I do think they have a lot of upside this season.
My 23rd pick, team is the Browns. I have the Browns this low because they disappointed me last year. I had a lot of hope for the Browns last year. I felt like they they were supposed to be a really good team. I didn't really buy into it as much as a lot of people did. I said they'd be a decent team, but they really did underperform last year, and they haven't really done much to change that. They did sign a really good tackle, Jack Conklin, and then that'll help them out. But I don't think the OBJ fit works no matter what. I don't think trying to force him the ball. I don't think he fits into the scheme whatsoever. And I feel like a trade would have been amazing. Get some picks and, fill in better needs. And a lot of other people think that too. Defensively, that's a really big thing for the Browns. They're not very good on defense. They signed some bigger names last year, but they're also older. But I don't think that the Browns will be very good next year. I think they could be good if, OBJ does work out and certain other players do. They have a good running back situation with Nick Chubb, and they did add Austin Hooper. But I just feel like I just need to see it before I can believe it.
23, I have the Patriots here. Obviously, everybody knows Tom Brady, after his whole career, has finally left New England. I have them here because I don't think their quarterback situation is 100%. I mean, you can argue when Tom Brady was suspended 4 games, how Jimmy Garoppolo came in and won. But Jimmy Garoppolo now is also a starting quarterback who just took his team to the Super Bowl. So I don't really want to compare things to that because right now, I'm pretty sure as of right now, their quarterback situation is Brian Hoyer. So depending on what they do draft day and stuff like that, they need to solve that quarterback situation. But their defense is pretty solid. So I think they could have a pretty good year. I know Belichick doesn't want to go down with a losing season. That's just not what he does. But I don't think they have the talent offensively to, carry on that dynasty.
At 23, I have the Houston Texans. I think that a lot of people will agree with me when I say that Bill O'Brien made a lot of bonehead decisions this offseason, especially trading away arguably the best receiver in the NFL, Nuke Hopkins. Him and Deshaun Watson, they pretty much carried that entire offense last year. So we'll see what happens this year. I don't see them even scratching close to the playoffs, even getting in a wild card game. I have them at number 23.
For my 22nd team, I have the Raiders. I feel like the Raiders, they could definitely have a good season. This is one of the teams that I feel like could climb up farther. Also, if they draft right now they have Derek Carr at quarterback. He showed some promising moments, but we don't really know if he's the answer yet. They also have Marcus Mariota. He hasn't really proven much in the league. So, I mean, that's a decent situation. But they have Darren Waller at tight end and Tyrell Williams. He's a decent receiver. So if they add a couple more weapons on offense, that would definitely help them out, which I think they'll go receiver in the first round. And if he pans out well, that'll be a really big help to the offense. But defensively, I feel like their cornerback situation is very, very suspect. They also have a lot of bigger needs on, they have a lot of problems on defense. So I think that they have a lot of holes to fill. And if they don't fill them, then this is where they're going to be.
At 22, I also have the Raiders. I think that definitely not as many holes to fill as last year. They didn't have a terrible season. Really hit on draft day, in my opinion, on Josh Jacobs. He had an amazing year. So that was definitely promising. Derek Carr, I think he has the potential to be able to do something great. But, I mean, I think they still need some receivers and stuff like that, and especially, like you said, cornerback position. So not a ton of holes to fill, but definitely some holes that could, come back to bite them.
Yeah, I also have the Raiders at 22. I think you guys summed it up pretty well. They could, depending on which route they choose to go in the draft, I personally think that if one of those top 3 receivers are there, Judy, Ruggs, or Lamb, that's who they should take. That could give them a pretty nice offense with Jacobs, Tyrell Williams, and Waller. But like you guys said, they also do have a lot of holes to fill on defense. So I have them at 21 or 22.
21 for me is the Cardinals. This is my biggest sleeper of like the whole entire season, them and the Steelers. I feel like the Cardinals, they could jump like super high, maybe even to the 10th spot or even higher maybe. Their offense is looking pretty good. I mean, so far they have Christian Kirk, a receiver, obviously the addition of DeAndre Hopkins. Kenyon Drake was actually a really good fit for them last year. He was a surprise player, breakout player for them. Kyler Murray showed a lot of promise last year with not many weapons. I feel like in the draft they're going to adjust the line position. If that pans out, that could be a really, really good offense. Defensively, there's a lot of holes. That's the problem with the Cardinals. They really need to figure a lot of stuff out on defense, in my opinion. It's really aging. Their players are getting older. Chandler Jones, Patrick Peterson, they're getting older, so they're going to have to fill in with some rookies in the draft. But if they draft well and everything pans out, I feel like they could be a team that could jump up really high and be a good team.
At 21, I have the Bears. Obviously they brought Nick Foles. Not sure what's going to go on there. If we're going to see a little off-season and training camp competition there between them two. Mitchell Trubisky has always been up in the air. Had a few decent games this year, especially against Dallas. I'd say that was probably one of his best games this year. He took his team to the playoffs back in 2018. The guy has promising moments, but depending on what they do with Nick Foles, I feel like he could work well with Matt Nagy. Defense is still pretty solid, but I think they still have a few holes to fill on offense before they can really get back to where they were when they made the playoffs in 2018.
At 21, I have the New England Patriots. Everybody knows Tom Brady's gone, but I think that move is overshadowing the rest of their team. I still think that they have a chance to be a pretty good team. I don't see them being the best team in their division. I think that'll be the Bills, but they still have a decent team. Like they're not going to be in tank mode. And like TJ said, Belichick's not one to lose games. Like he will find a way to win them games. So I have them at 21.
At 19, I have the Bears. The Bears are another team that I feel like if Nick Foles is a good fit, they could be a pretty good team. Offensively, last year was pretty horrendous with Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback. He had a lot of problems getting touchdowns, getting his team in the red zone to score points. With the addition of Nick Foles, I feel like TJ said, hit on it a little bit, that he could be a good fit with Matt Nagy, which he had connections with the Eagles. I feel like that could be a really good scheme fit. And if that works out, that could be a pretty good team because they have Allen Robinson, Tariq Cohen, their rookie running back. They have a pretty well-rounded roster, I think. Defensively, I think that's one of their stronger points. They did lose a few people. I think they lost Prince and Mukamara last year. I'm not 100% on that, but I think they did. But overall, I feel like their defense is pretty good as well. So I feel like if it pans out with Nick Foles, they could be a team that could jump up pretty high and be a good team.
At 20, I have the Texans. Obviously, we know that it was a huge trade. David Johnson coming over for DeAndre Hopkins, who, in my opinion, top 2 wide receiver. Traded him away for a second-round pick, which I think he was definitely worth a lot more. I think they should have definitely got, if they were going to trade away, they're definitely, in my opinion, the best player on that team. Definitely should have got, a first-round pick out of it. But they got a second-round pick out of it. Still a lot of promising things. I mean, they made it to the playoffs this year. We can't forget. I think I wouldn't harp on David Johnson. Obviously didn't have a good year the past 2 years. He's been struggling with injury. So we'll just have to see what happens. But at this point, I have him at 20. I don't think they're going to have that playoff run like they did last year. So a few holes to fill there before they can bounce back up.
At 20, I have the Chicago Bears. They brought in Robert Quinn on defense to play alongside Khalil Mack. They also have Eddie Jackson on defense. So they have a solid defense, but the big question for them is what's going on at quarterback. Are they playing Trubisky? Are they playing Foles? I think they have a nice 1-2 punch at running back with Cohen and Montgomery. And Allen Robinson outside, he shows potential at times. So I think that they could potentially climb depending on how their offense goes, but I feel like their offense could at the same time hold them back.
I agree. At 18, I have the Rams. I feel like the Rams are still a pretty decent team. Overall, the roster isn't too bad. They still have a lot of stars. Todd Gurley left, but they have Jalen Ramsey. They added Jalen Ramsey. That's a huge signing. They still have Jared Goff. Jared Goff definitely had a worse season than his Super Bowl year last year. Still have Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, two good receivers. I feel like they could be a really good team. But with the losses of Todd Gurley, they really kind of need to fill their running back situation. And also, they lost Brandon Cooks, which is also a big loss. So I feel like they need to fill those positions. Defensively, I feel like they're getting older, and it's going to be harder and harder to fill those positions as it goes on. They're sort of having like a Super Bowl drought, sort of like the Eagles did after their Super Bowl the year after. So we'll see what happens. I feel like the Rams, they're kind of stuck. They don't really have a lot of their star players like they did their Super Bowl year, but I feel like if they draft well, they could be a decent team too.
At 19, I have the Packers. I think that they don't have enough weapons other than Devontae Adams on offense to pair along with Aaron Rodgers. I think they need to get Aaron Rodgers weapons while they can. A few holes on defense that obviously need to be filled. I wouldn't count them out just yet. That's why I have them here at 19. I feel like they could do pretty well, depending on how they go draft day. Hopefully a receiver. I think that would be the best thing for them. But as of right now, I have them sitting at 19.
At 19, I have the Rams. Their team is aging. We all know that. They have some bad contracts like Goff. And I didn't really understand what they were doing with Gurley and Cooks because I'm pretty sure from what I've seen that they're still paying them a lot of money, like 25% of the team's salary they're using on players that aren't even on roster. So those are some questionable decisions. But I still think that they have a decent team. If their veterans can play, they could be a playoff team in my opinion, but I just don't think that they're going to pan out this year. So I have them at 19.
At 18, I have the Texans. The Texans, I feel like they're Bill O'Brien made a bunch of dumb moves to me for previous years and just last year trading Hopkins. Obviously, it wasn't a good trade value-wise. But, I mean, they added Randall Cobb. They still have pretty many good promising points on their team. Their defense is probably it still needs a lot of work, but they're not too bad on defense. And you can't forget they have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, Deshaun Watson. And I feel like Deshaun Watson, he's going to still put up a lot of good, solid wins for the team. And I feel like if don't forget, they still have the draft. So if they draft well, I feel like they could jump up even more and maybe make a wild card. But other than that, I don't really feel like they have the firepower to, win the division this year maybe. But that division's sort of wide open more than a lot of other divisions. So I feel like they have a shot, but I think they're pretty well sitting at like round 17.
At 18, I have the Vikings. Obviously, departure of a few big defensive players. Lost Stephon Diggs. So right now, their offensive receiving game is, very, very heavy set on Adam Thielen at this point, which don't get me wrong, he's an amazing player. But, I mean, you can't really just win a game with just one, star receiver and say, our receiving game is going to be perfect. And especially their defense was amazing and now lost, for example, Xavier Rhodes. So I think that might come back to hurt them. So depending what they go draft day, I think that they need to fill a receiver and cornerback before, they can get back to that NFC Championship season in 2017.
At 18, I have the Falcons. To start with their defense, they brought in Dante Fowler. He'll definitely help with the pass rush. But they did lose their best cornerback and probably secondary player, Desmond Trufant. They need some help there, whether they build in the draft or through trade. On offense, we know that they have a lot of potential. They brought in Todd Gurley. They still have Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. But they did also lose Austin Hooper, who was one of the best tight ends in the league last year. So I think they have a lot of promise this season if they can protect Matt Ryan up front. That'll be a big key. But as of now, I have them at 18.
I just want to say that I made a mistake. I forgot the Bengals somehow. My draft is a little bit screwed up. But, like, for me, the Bengals are within 25 to 32, probably closer, like, in the middle of 32 and 25. Like, I'm just going to roll off what TJ and Kade said. They're sort of in, like, a rebuild mode. They're going to build through the draft. They're definitely not winning a championship this year, but they're just going to see what the future holds for them. 16, or my 17th pick, the Falcons. I think that they could be a pretty good team this year. Every year I feel like they could be a good team, but it seems like they let me down every year. I feel like I have them pretty high on my list. But I feel like this year, this could be one of their years where they can make the playoffs and sneak in. They obviously have Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley. They added Todd Gurley. They have Matt Ryan. Their offense is pretty solid, in my opinion. That's their strong point. Defensively, there's some holes. They need cornerbacks. They need a couple edge rushers. They need a lot of things on defense as well. So I feel like if they draft well, they could move up and be a playoff team. But right now, I would say they're not a playoff team, but they're close to it if they can add a few key positions.
At 17, I have the Rams. Like Kade said, they lost quite a few big players, Todd Gurley, Brandon Cooks. They're aging pretty fast. I'm not 100% that I think Jared Goff is by any means like anything special. I think he still has a lot of work to do. But I think if you surround him with weapons, I think that he could be extremely well. Defensive-wise, they added Jalen Ramsey last year. He didn't play amazing, but, I mean, the guy's still a great player. Maybe he still needs time to get set in. But as of right now, I am sitting at 17. I wouldn't count them out completely, but had a lot of departures that were pretty big names, which I think is going to hurt them.
At 17, I have the Denver Broncos. I really liked what I saw out of Drew Lock late in the season last year. If he can continue that type of play, I think their offense can flourish. I still think that they need another receiver to pair with Sutton, but they did bring in Melvin Gordon, so I think that offense has a lot of potential. Defense, they brought in a few pieces, but they did also lose Chris Harris, so I think it's really going to depend on the play of Drew Lock this season. That's going to depend how good they do.
Yep, I agree. With the 16th team, I have the Patriots. Like Kade and TJ sort of hit on, the Patriots are, they lost Tom Brady. Obviously, a lot of people are counting them out, but you can't really ever count Bill Belichick's team out, no matter who's on the team. He's a great coach, and he gets the most out of all of his players. So no matter who the quarterback is, no matter who the players are, he's going to get the most out of them. And in a division where the teams they have a lot of young teams, the Bills, Jets, and Dolphins, they're all very young quarterbacks and inexperienced. So Bill Belichick, he's a defensive-minded coach. I feel like the defense is still very solid. Obviously, they lost a few pieces like Jamie Collins. They lost some other people, Kyle Van Noy. But obviously, the draft is still to come. And if they draft a quarterback, maybe. I think Stidham, we don't know what he can bring to the table yet. We'll see. But as of right now, I have them sitting at 16 because I think they could still possibly be a playoff team.
At 16, I have the Panthers. Obviously, a lot of big departures. Before free agency hit and all these players end up either retiring or, being released, you asked me to name the three best players on that team. I'm probably going to say, at least two out of the three players, including Christian McCaffrey, were players that are now gone. Obviously, Luke Kuechly, Cam Newton. They did bring in Teddy Bridgewater, added Robbie Anderson, but I don't think that's enough for them to be completely ready to win a championship. I think their defense still needs some work yet, but offense is really good. I think that will help them win a lot of games this year, but we just have to see what the future brings, and that's why I'm sitting at 16.
At 16, I have the Cardinals. They brought in Hopkins. That gives him one of the best receiving corps in the NFL alongside bring him in, play alongside Larry Fitz, Christian Kirk, Andy Isabella. So you pair them with Rookie of the Year, Kyler Murray, and Kenyon Drake. He looked very promising last year. Their defense didn't really change too much. I think that their offense is going to be, what their offense is going to be, but their defense, if they can get them going, I think they could be a very dangerous team next year. They definitely will fight for a playoff spot if their defense plays up to par.
I agree too. For the 15th team, I have the Steelers. That's my sleeper team this year, and it's like that's the sleeper team for a lot of teams this year. A lot of people are just counting them out just because Big Ben, he's older and he hasn't played last year, but people forget that they have like a top 3 defense in the NFL. Minka Fitzpatrick was an all-pro last year. They have TJ Watt. They have a lot of good players on defense. And offensively, they're not too bad either. They have one of the best offensive lines in the league. James Conner has showed promise at running back Juju Smith-Schuster. And if they don't have a first-round pick this year, but if they hit on some of their picks, their earlier picks, second, third round picks, they could definitely fight for a playoff spot and maybe even a championship if Ben comes back to the caliber. I don't think that they will, but I think that they could definitely make the playoffs.
At 15, I have the Colts. They brought in Phillip Rivers this year, Xavier Rhodes, DeForest Buckner, I think, which are a lot of big names. I still think Phillip Rivers has a lot left in the tank. Obviously, Eric Ebron walked, but that defense looks really solid. Now with DeForest Buckner, my bad, messed up there a little bit. But Darius Leonard they have on defense. And I think that Phillip Rivers still does have a little bit left on the tank. T.Y. Hilton is still not a wide receiver that I would count out yet. Obviously, last year, that quarterback situation was up in the air with Andrew Luck surprisingly retiring like that and then having Jacoby Brissett come in. But I still think that they can make a pretty good run with the team that they have if they utilize their players well and they fit the system.
They did get DeForest Buckner, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they did get DeForest Buckner.
That's who they traded. That's who they traded their first round pick.
Well, I said that at first. I said that they added him.
Yeah.
But I stumbled there.
Yeah, it's all good.
At 15, I have the Cleveland Browns. Last year, they really disappointed me. I think, as a lot of people, they did too. I think they can only go up from last year. They brought in Jack Conklin, Austin Hooper. I still think that they need a little bit more help on that line, but they have weapons for Baker. They have Nick Chubb. I don't know how what his role will be next year. They still have OBJ, Jarvis Landry. So the offense on paper, the offense looks deadly. So, but their defense has a question mark next to it for me. So we'll see how that works next year. But I do think they have a lot of upside.
14th, the 14th team for me is the Colts. Like TJ said, they added some key players. DeForest Buckner, they added Xavier Rhodes. I feel like their team is pretty well solid. They have Marlon Mack at running back. They have T.Y. Hilton at receiver. They have pretty much everything you need to really win a championship. They signed Phillip Rivers. I don't really know how good he's going to be. He's always been a pretty decent quarterback in the league, but he had weapons over there with the Chargers, and he really honestly disappointed. So I don't really know if I can bank on Phillip Rivers to be this really good quarterback. So, I mean, their defense isn't bad. They had Pierre Desir, their one corner. They lost him to go. He went to the Jets. So they kind of need to build through the draft. They're another team that if they draft well, they could move up. It also depends a lot on how Phillip Rivers' play is. But right now, I feel like if he plays good and they draft well, they could definitely be a playoff team if they perform.
At 14 here, I have the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals can be a really surprise team this year. Obviously, Kyler Murray won Rookie of the Year and did that with a 36-year-old wide receiver, Larry Fitzgerald, who, I mean, he's still playing at a very talented level. Brought in DeAndre Hopkins, who I think will be a really good player to pair next to him. Defense may need a little bit of work, but, I mean, they do have Chandler Jones, Patrick Peterson. But I think they can hold on pretty well if they, in this draft, add some players to their offensive line and protect Kyler Murray. I think that they can really be a surprise team.
At 14, I have the Vikings. The contract that they gave Kirk Cousins really hurt them, and it showed this offseason. They lost Stephon Diggs, Linval Joseph, and Everson Griffith. I think Diggs, though, is the biggest loss for them. He really played a huge role in that offense last year. Even when he wasn't being targeted, he still opened up for Adam Thielen. They bring back Dalvin Cook, but they have 2 first-round picks. We'll see which way they go with those, but their defense is going to be the question mark, and I think that Kirk Cousins is going to have to step his play up this year.
Oh yeah. The 13th pick the 13th team for me is the Bucks. The Buccaneers on paper, I feel like they could be a pretty good team. Obviously, their biggest addition was Tom Brady. Their offense is really stellar. I mean, they have 2 really amazing receivers, the best duo at wide receiver, in my opinion. O.J. Howard at tight end, if he can stay healthy, I think he can be a pretty promising tight end in the league. Their running back isn't very good, but their offense in general is, Tom Brady makes the best out of his running backs in the passing game. So I feel like that offense can be one of the best in the NFL if Tom Brady fits with the scheme and the team. Defensively, there definitely is holes in the defense for sure. That's what the draft's for. That's a route that I think they'll go in the draft. I think they'll go primarily defense, but also the offensive line is sort of suspect for Tom Brady. And if you have an old quarterback like him, you really need to make sure you protect him. So if they draft well, I think they could be a playoff team.
Yeah, 13, I also have the Buccaneers. Obviously, brought in Tom Brady, big name QB. Their receiving core, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, is an exceptional receiving core. The only hole that I could really say on offense that I don't know if they're 100% set on, other than their offensive line, would be their running back. I just don't know if Ronald Jones is, if he's the running back that's going to fit that team or if he's going to be anything well. Defense, obviously a lot of holes. I mean, you have Shaquille Barrett and Ndamukong Suh, but still a lot of defensive needs. But, I mean, offensively, I think that this team is going to be a powerhouse, and I think that they can win a lot of games.
At 13, I have the Steelers. They have Big Ben healthy right now, but if he can stay healthy, I think that they're a playoff team, but that is a very big if. He has a lot of injury concern with him. Considering that they almost made the playoffs last year with Rudolph and Duck Hodges, they have a good shot this year again. Their defense, they did add Minka Fitzpatrick last year. He played really well for them. So if they can even, as long as Big Ben stays healthy, I think that they're a playoff team.
I agree. For the 12th team, I have the Eagles. I think the Eagles, they're a pretty well-rounded team overall. Obviously, they have a good franchise quarterback, Carson Wentz. He's proven that he can do a lot without weapons on his team. So a definite thing for me, obviously, is receiver. If they build a receiver, they could really excel. They have a lot of injury-prone players on that offense. So if they hit with their receiver picks and fix that offense up a little bit, I think they could be one of the best high-flying offenses in the NFL. Defensively, they added Darius Slay. Obviously, that's a huge addition. D-line is top 5 in the NFL, maybe even top 3. Safety is kind of a concern for me. That's one of the bigger things, and also linebacker is a concern. So I feel like those are 2 important positions on a defense. So I feel like they need to build there, and if they do, they can quite easily win the NFC East and make the playoff.
If at 12, I have the Titans. Obviously, made a great run last year in the playoffs, and just paid Ryan Tannehill to a pretty decent-sized contract. Derrick Henry, top 3 running back in the NFL. In my eyes, I feel like he's the one who really carried them through the playoffs. So it all depends on what they do in the draft. Defensive-wise, they have a lot of holes to fill. And, I mean, even a few on offense, in my opinion. But I have them sitting at 12. I wouldn't completely count them out this yet, but I don't think they're going to have that kind of season they did last year. Like I said, in the playoffs, like Ryan Tannehill, did not throw many yards, did not have a lot of attempts, barely any touchdowns. Like, you look at those games. I know me and Devin have talked about this. You look at that, like Derrick Henry, it's just they feed him the ball the whole time. And I think that depending on how everything pans out in the draft with defense-wise, I think that they can be a decent team, but I don't see them being in the top 10.
Yeah, at 12, I have the Packers. They had a really quiet free agency. I do think that they did get worse from last year. but I still think with Rodgers as their quarterback, they're going to have a shot to be a playoff team. We'll get to see their second season with Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers, so I think that'll work better next year for them. I still think that they need another receiver to pair with Vontae Adams, but I still, like I said, with Rodgers as their quarterback, especially as a Dallas fan, I know what he's capable of, so I have them at 12.
My 12th, or my 11th, my bad. My 11th team is the Titans. The Titans are a really good team, I feel like. I feel like there's still some question marks. I feel like it all really depends on Derrick Henry. I mean, if Derrick Henry goes down, if he gets injured, if something happens to Derrick Henry, I mean, that offense just goes from one of the better offenses in the NFL to a very, very low offense. They're very reliant on the run game. I'm not really too fond of their quarterback, Ryan Tannehill. I feel like he's really a system, just sort of rides on the back of Derrick Henry, but he got the job done, won some big playoff games and got him to the playoffs. So you can't really discredit him for that. But overall, I feel like they have a pretty good team. They lost throughout Casey, and they gained some decent pieces too. So I feel like the Bills are still a really solid team, have one of the best defenses in the NFL, and can they also gain Stephon Diggs, which is going to be huge for Josh Allen. So I feel like they could easily win that division.
At 11, I have the Browns. I wouldn't count them out just yet. Didn't like last year before the year. They were a team that was really hyped up and did not live up to that hype. But I think this is, like I said a few times before to Devin, over a 2-year span, they've had 3 different head coaches, 3 new systems, which could probably be a big, question mark. Like that, I'm not an NFL player, but I can imagine that can really affect players. Obviously have some big weapons. Not sure what route they're gonna go with Odell yet, but Nick Chubb, Jarvis Landry, a lot of big names on that offense, and I feel like they can be a pretty lethal team. See if things start to work out between them and the coaching system. But as of right now, I have them sitting at 11.
11, I have the Buccaneers. They added the biggest name in football and free agency in Tom Brady. But I think we also have to remember which Tom Brady we're getting. We're not getting Tom Brady in his prime. We're getting 43-year-old Tom Brady. He has never been a very mobile quarterback, and especially up in age now, he's not going to be making many plays outside of the pocket. And what's one of their biggest weaknesses on their offense, or if not their biggest, their offensive line. So they really need to address that before the start of the season. I think they will in the draft. I think that they could also benefit from drafting pass-catching running back in the draft. Brady's always loved them. But the biggest question mark is their defense. If their defense can play well, they're definitely a playoff team, in my opinion. I think that they could make a shot to go deep in the playoffs, too, if their defense plays.
I agree. My 10th team is the Vikings. The Vikings, I feel like they have one of the most solid rosters in the NFL. They usually do almost every year. They have a lot of stars on their team. Obviously, Adam Thielen, Harrison Smith. They have the other good safety they have. There was a lot of key departures from the Vikings. They lost Trey Waynes, Linval Joseph, Everson Griffin. But there's also a lot of bright points on their team. Obviously, they have Dalvin Cook. They have pretty many good offensive linemen. Adam Thielen, like I said before. And if they build right in the draft, they definitely need help at wide receiver to fill the depth up there. But if they build right in the draft and they fill a few pieces on defense, I think that they can be a real playoff contender.
At number 10, it's going to be a surprise, but I have the Dolphins. I think what they did in free agency on both sides of the football was definitely the best. I'd give them an A in free agency. They definitely were the winners on both offensive and defensive free agency. Added Byron Jones, Jordan Howard, Mukruzer Hill, solved a lot of problems. And right now it's just looking for, hopefully in this draft, bring in the quarterback that fits the system and, can win games with these players that they brought in.
At 10, I have the Titans. Obviously, a great season last year, made a good playoff run. They re-signed their quarterback, Ryan Tannehill. I kind of think this was a little bit of a mistake, though. I think that they should have prioritized bringing back their offensive line, which is what allowed Derrick Henry to feast last year. Arguably be the best running back in football. They lost their right tackle, Jack Conklin. They did lose Jarrell Casey, right?
Yeah, they lost Joel Casey.
Yeah, they still have a good defense, don't get me wrong. But I think that they should have prioritized their offensive line in free agency. That was their bread and butter alongside Derrick Henry last year. So we'll see what happens again this year. Last season, maybe a fluke, maybe not. I think this season will really tell.
Yeah, I agree. And for the Titans pick, I accidentally said that Stephon Diggs went there. He didn't go there. I made a mistake there. The 8th team or the 9th team for me is the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys have one of the best rosters overall. It just, I don't know. Based off of what I saw last year, they didn't perform well at all. I hope it's the coaching situation that was the reason why they didn't perform well. Jason Garrett, obviously, he's one of the worst. Like, that's why he wasn't re-signed as a head coach. He's re-signed as an offensive coordinator. He wasn't a great coach at all. You could tell that he wasn't really involved with the game, and I feel like that was really what was holding them back. Obviously, they have a really good duo at wide receiver. They have Dak, their franchise quarterback, Ezekiel Elliott. And they did lose a key piece, Travis Frederick, on the line, but they still have a top 10 O-line in the league. And Joe Looney is a reliable player, too, to fill in. Defensively, there definitely is some holes. They need a number one corner, and they also could use another edge rusher. But I feel like that's quite easy to fill in the draft. I mean, corner might be a little bit harder, but other than that, I feel like this roster is pretty complete overall. So I feel like the Cowboys could definitely win that division and go deep in the playoffs and maybe compete for a championship.
At 9, I have the Falcons. I think that this team can be like really special, do some really great things. Obviously, I think I saw a report that they have like 11 total past first-round picks on their team. Brought in Todd Gurley, have Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, really promising receiver. I think that thing could be really high-powered. Defensively, I think they still have some needs on that side of the football. But offensively, I mean, this team is just on paper. I can't obviously say anything yet, but this team looks like a powerhouse.
Number 9, I have the Colts. They brought in Philip Rivers and DeForest Buckner this year. I think that those two signings alone allow them, or that makes them the favorite to win the division. Last year they had one of the most talented rosters on paper in the NFL, in my opinion, but the unexpected departure of Andrew Luck really set them back. With Rivers this year, he's going to be protected. He has a good offensive line. So I think they have a good chance to make a run in the playoffs.
8th, I have the Buffalo Bills. This is one of my really good teams, I think, coming out of the AFC. They obviously have a young quarterback in Josh Allen. He's shown some promising moments, but he's also developing as a passer. He still makes some dumb decisions, but he's also a very mobile quarterback. They obviously added a great receiver in Stephon Diggs, which is a huge addition to the team. It'll finally get Josh Allen that number one receiver that I feel like he really needs to grow and develop in that scheme and offense. They also have Devin Singletary. He's a pretty good running back. Defensively, they had a top defense in the NFL. Top 3 defense in the NFL last year. And I just feel like if that offense can really pick it up, because last year that was their problem. Their offense couldn't really keep up with some of the better offenses in the NFL. If their offense can really do good next year, the sky's the limit for the Bills.
At 8, I have the Cowboys. I think that they are a pretty well-rounded team. Hopefully McCarthy can come in and, fix that, because I do agree with Devin. It definitely was a coaching aspect in my eyes. I mean, at the beginning of the year, throughout the whole year, their offense was so high-powered. But I still think that they have some work to do before, they climb and win that championship. Obviously paid a lot of big-name players. I'm not sure. Are they still negotiating with Dak yet? Did they come to terms?
Yeah, he got franchise tag, but he's
They franchise thing. But depending on how they, do things, I mean, look at how high powered they were last year and failed to make the playoffs. So, only time can tell. We'll see how things go, but I think that they're a really high powered team. Obviously defense needs a few positions to be filled in now, But otherwise, I think they're pretty well set on both sides of the football.
8, I have the Philadelphia Eagles. Last year, they were plagued with injuries. They added lockdown corner, Darius Slay. I love that signing for them. Well, as a Cowboys fan, I don't really like it too much, but I think it was good for them. They need to find another receiver, though, in my opinion. Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey, good when healthy, but that's when they are healthy, and that's not too often anymore these days. They have probably the best tight end duo in the league, and Zach Ertz and I can't think of his name. What's his
Dallas
name?
Goddard.
Yeah, Goddard. I love that, what they got going there. Carson Wentz, we know what he's capable of. He had an MVP caliber season a few years ago. But I just think that they need a little bit more help in the secondary, and I think they definitely need a receiver if they want to see that type of play out of Carson Wentz again.
Yep. With my 7th team, I have the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks are one of the teams that are also pretty well-rounded. They obviously have one of the best quarterbacks in Russell Wilson. Tyler Lockett has always been a good player there. They added Greg Olsen. That also helps give him another weapon. They have 2 good running backs, Chris Carson, and on defensively, they're pretty good on defense as well. It's gonna really depend on if Jadeveon Clowney resigns to really determine if they need to draft a defensive end in the draft, go that route. But for me, if he resigns, they can be one of the better teams in the NFL. He's a game changer to a defense. He hasn't signed yet. So if it keeps going like this, all signs will point that he might sign back with the Seahawks if teams aren't giving him the offer that he wants. And they also added one of the lockdown corners in the NFL, Quentin Dunbar. He had a really good PFF grade last year. So I feel like the Seahawks could be a really good team and make a shot at Super Bowl.
At 7, I have the Philadelphia Eagles. Obviously, last year, pretty played with injuries, but Carson Wentz was still able to make something out of nothing. Took his team to the playoffs. Obviously, lost in the first round, but with the receiving core that he took into the playoffs, I mean, that's just amazing. So, hopefully, draft a QB, not a QB, wide receiver. Hopefully, draft a wide receiver this year. Surround Wentz with weapons, because we saw last year he's obviously capable of being able to make something out of nothing. Tight ends, like Kade said, is in my opinion, best duo in the league. We added Darius Slade on the defensive side of the ball, which when he played Amari Cooper in 2 games, pretty much locked him up, which I think will be important for the Eagles playing the Cowboys twice a year, and even just against some other, because that's been a big struggle for them. So now we finally have a cornerback that has proven he's pretty locked down. So I think that they can have a pretty well season depending on how we go.
7, I have the Dallas Cowboys. They did lose Byron Jones and Robert Quinn in free agency. They also lost Travis Frederick to retirement. But I'm glad that they got rid of Mr. Clapp himself, Jason Garrett. They brought in McCarthy. But they still do have some holes to fill. They need help in the secondary. Specifically at the cornerback 1 position. They need someone to lock down the big name receivers. Their line is looking a little thin offensively, their line. But I think if the receivers, if they can get maybe one more slot receiver, they definitely need a little bit of depth there too. But they have the pieces for Dak. He has the offense. But I've been let down by them before, but at the same time, Dak's rookie year, he looked great when he had the receivers around him. As long as they stay healthy this year, I think that they could be a very good team.
With the 6th team, I have the Packers. Yeah, the Packers. I feel like the Packers could be a really good team. They usually are a really good team, one of the best teams. They almost always make the playoffs. They obviously have one of the best QBs in the league, Aaron Rodgers. Really good production running back Aaron Jones. It puts up a lot of touchdowns every single year. They have Devontae Adams on that with that offense. That's a really good piece to their team. They do need more receivers, which is obviously the route that they'll go in the draft. For sure, then they'll fill that in the draft. Defensively, I felt like their defense was really good last year. I felt like they had a pretty good defense. So I just feel like they're a really good team overall. And with Aaron Rodgers, if they get him pieces, they could definitely make a good run in the playoffs, like he has done before in the past.
At number 6, I have the Bills. Obviously, made it to the playoffs last year. Had a pretty good season. Added Stephon Diggs, which I think will be a huge help for them, especially Josh Allen, who I think this year has proved that he's capable of being a franchise quarterback for them. Has a heck of an arm. Didn't have the greatest wide receivers last year, but still made something out of nothing. And I think that they can be a team that might slip their way back into the playoffs again this year.
At 6, I have the Seattle Seahawks. One of the biggest questions for me with them this year is, are they going to bring Clowney back? I think that, like Devin said, he is a game changer on defense. But offensively, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, they look good last year. Russell Wilson, MVP caliber player. I think as long as he stays healthy, they're going to be good. They're going to have a shot at the Super Bowl.
I agree. My 5th team is the Saints. The Saints have been good the past couple of years. They obviously have a really good quarterback, a Hall of Fame quarterback in Drew Brees. He's getting up in age. And if I was that GM, they did exactly what I would have did and went out and picked him up another weapon. Emmanuel Sanders is what I feel like that's a really big upgrade. They never really had a solid number 2 and number 3 receiver that is really going to help them out, especially with a deep receiver draft class. They could draft another one if they really wanted it. Obviously, you have Alvin Kamara. He was injured quite a bit last year, so that hurt them a little bit. Lions good. Defensively, they're also a pretty decent team. They have lockdown corner, Marshawn Lattimore, some other key players on that defense, Cameron Jordan. So I feel like, I felt like they could have won the Super Bowl last year if they would have just performed the right way. They just sort of choked in the playoffs as they done before the past couple of years. But I feel like if they perform in the playoffs and they the free agency signings that they've acquired, I feel like they could definitely be a really good playoff team and make us run at the Super Bowl.
Yep, at 5, I also have the Saints. Like you said, brought in Emmanuel Sanders to pair him along next to Michael Thomas. Now, he's obviously not Emmanuel Sanders obviously isn't no top 10 receiver or anything like that, but he's definitely, a solid receiver, and I think will help Drew Brees big time. Defensive-wise, Cameron Jordan, amazing defensive lineman, and they even brought in Malcolm Jenkins at safety, who, when he played for the Eagles, didn't miss a snap in like 2 years. So he's a really solid player, can play cornerback too, can move around, plays a lot of positions. But yeah, I think that, past couple of years, they've been screwed over a couple of times, but I think that they have the power that they can definitely, win a lot of games and easily find themselves in the playoffs.
At 5, I have the Bills. I loved what they did offensively in free agency. They went out and got Josh Allen, a number 1 receiver, and Stephon Diggs. They paired him with alongside Cole Beasley and John Brown. But I think that how good they do this year is going to depend on the growth of Josh Allen.
I agree. With the fourth team, I have I screwed up with the Bengals pick. This is my 3rd one. This is for me, my 3rd is the 49ers. I screwed up with my draft because I forgot to put the Bengals in. But my 3rd team is the 49ers. I just feel like they're a really well-rounded team overall. Defensively, they have the best defense in the NFL. DeForest Buckner did go, but they have 2 first-round picks, and I feel with that later pick, they will definitely fill that. Even if they don't, they still have a top 3D line in the NFL. They lost Emmanuel Sanders last year, but I feel like with that first pick, it's a definite receiver pick. So I feel like that offense could, if they get him a top receiver, Jimmy Garoppolo, they don't really have that last year. So I feel like if they get him a top receiver, that could be by far one of the best offenses in the NFL with that great running game. So that's why I have them ranked 3rd or 4th. Yeah, 3rd for me.
At 4, I have the Seattle Seahawks. Personally, this team, I mean, they really didn't lose too many big name players. I went to the game where they played the Eagles in the playoffs this year. And I mean, just watching those players in person, Russell Wilson, top 3 quarterback in the NFL in my eyes, amazingly mobile, makes crazy throws. Tyler Lockett, amazing receiver. DK Metcalf proved a lot last year. Have a pretty nice running game going for them. Defensive side, uh, they have the Griffin brothers who are promising. Depending on what they do with Jadeveon Clowney, a lot of things can go up in the air defensively. But I think on both sides of the football, they're a solid team. Made it to the playoffs last year, and I think that they can easily do it again.
At 4, I have the Saints. Defensively, they brought in Malcolm Jenkins. I thought that was a pretty good veteran to bring in for them. On the offensive side, I love that they brought in Emmanuel Sanders. Their team's full of playoff experience, and this might be Drew Brees' last ride. So come next February, I would not be surprised to see them holding the Lombardi Trophy.
My second team is the Ravens. I feel like the Ravens, they were a very young team last year. They had a lot of inexperienced players. They had a rookie as their number 1 wide receiver. Obviously, Lamar Jackson, a very young quarterback. They just had a really young team overall, and I feel like their team overall is one of the best in the NFL. I feel like they're lacking from their team, and in my opinion, they're also lacking a number 1 receiver. I feel like they should maybe add a receiver to their team, another piece another weapon for Lamar Jackson, develop him as a passer a little bit more. But they also have a top 3 defense in the NFL, and Lamar Jackson showed last year that he could be an amazing quarterback. So I feel like the Ravens could easily win the Super Bowl if they perform in the playoffs.
At number 3, I have the 49ers. Obviously, we're in the Super Bowl this year. Amazing defense. Didn't really lose too many people on that side of the ball other than DeForest Buckner. Offensively, definitely lacks a receiver. But, I mean, they made it to the Super Bowl this year. They have a pretty high pick in the draft this year where I think they can get one of those top 3 name receivers, which would pair great along Jimmy Garoppolo and George Kittle. So I think I would not count them out at all. I think that what they've done after losing the Super Bowl, it doesn't look like they're going to fall into a drought whatsoever. So I think they're a team that we're going to be see competing for the Lombardi Trophy this year again.
At 3, I have the Ravens. Last year, we know that they choked in the playoffs, but they're going to look to build off that their last year. Defense is great. They also brought in Calais Campbell. It's definitely going to help them too. Like Devin said, I think that they do need a number 1 wide receiver. I wouldn't be surprised if they took one in the draft. And Lamar Jackson, as long as he doesn't get hurt, they're looking at a 1 or 2 seed in the NFC.
This is my first team. Obviously, I feel like the Chiefs for me is the best team in the NFL. The most important position in football is quarterback, and right now there's no arguing that, in my opinion, that Patrick Mahomes is not the number 1 quarterback in the NFL. He's so special. He could go down as one of the best quarterbacks in history. He just has that different motor that gets him wins, and that just puts it different than any other quarterback. And even with kind of like a suspect defense last year, not to say that their defense wasn't the best. Their defense wasn't an amazing defense. He just got it done. His offense was so good. And in my opinion, they have the best offense in the NFL with Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Mecole Hardman. They have a lot of big weapons for Patrick Mahomes, a lot of speed guys. So I just feel like I don't see them slowing down at all. They're obviously going to build in the draft as well, and I just feel like they can just win it again quite easily.
At 2, I have the Chiefs here. The big reason I have them at number 2 is because I think defensive-wise, I think that they might have some struggles. Obviously, this team offensive-wise is amazing. Can't say really any negative things about that. I'm not saying that, just because I don't have them at number 1, that they're not going to compete for that Lombardi Trophy. I think that they're going to be a heck of a team again this year. But I think defensive-wise, I don't think they're going to be able to fill every single hole that's missing on that defense. But I still think that they're going to be a really good team, and they're going to come out and compete.
At 2, I have the 49ers. I think that they might have the best all-around team in the NFL. well, on paper, their roster. They lost DeForest Buckner and Emmanuel Sanders. But they do have 2 first-round picks this year, which is unusual for a team that was in the Super Bowl. So they can fill some holes there. I'm not sure if Jimmy G is the long-term solution for them there, but he got it done last year. He didn't really perform too well in the Super Bowl, but I still think that they'll be competing for a championship again.
Yeah, so Devin, you already did your number 1 because you missed
Yeah.
the Bengals or whatever. All
Yeah.
right, so I'll hop into this. Number 1, I have the Ravens. I really like the Ravens. Other than the 49ers, I'd say that they look pretty solid on both sides of the football. Really hard-hitting defense. Offense, I mean, Marquise Brown was a rookie receiver, was pretty much their number 1 receiver. Lamar Jackson really did like Hayden Hurst last year. Obviously, he departed. But I think if you're really looking for a receiver, which is probably their biggest need in my eyes, I think that this year, this wide receiver class is just so loaded. Taking somebody like KJ Hamler in the 2nd round or something like that would be a great player to pair with Lamar Jackson. And I think what really hurt them, why they didn't make it as far as they did in the playoffs is they had that 1st round bye. Their starter sat week 16, week 17, and then they had that 1st round bye. So their players came out off of a 2-week, of inexperience, and then, just came right in. And I think that's what slowed them down.
Yeah, my number 1 team is the Chiefs. Obviously, the Super Bowl champs. Re-signed their biggest free agent, Chris Jones. They're returning 20 of their 22 starters last year. The only 2 people that they lost were guard Steven Wisniewski and linebacker Reggie Ragland. They'll build in the draft too. They'll address some of their holes. But that offense, so deadly. Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, we all know what they're capable of. They've done it for a few years now. And they're my favorite to win the Super Bowl.
All right, so that concludes our rankings. Hope you guys liked the video. Make sure to like and subscribe it, and we'll be coming out with more content shortly.